During the 8th century, the Scandinavian tribes and petty kingdoms changed a great deal. Newly built trading centres exposed the people to the wealth and culture of mainland Europe, and the world temperature increased as part of the medieval warm period, allowing them to sail and eventually raid throughout the year. But Charlemagne began to attack pagans in the region, so some speculate they began to raid Christians for revenge. So under chieftains in 789, Vikings from Norway first attacked England, raiding Portland in the south. In 793 they sacked Lindisfarne in the north, an island filled with riches and inhabited only by monks, and the next year they raided the influential monk Wearmouth Jarrow Abbey. These raids continued over the following decades, and some Scandinavians were able to amass a great amount of wealth. England at this time was made up of several kingdoms: Northumbria, Mercia, East Anglia, Essex, Kent, Sussex, Wessex and Dumnonia, and none of them had the strength or tactics to successfully stop the raids. But England wasn't the Vikings' only target. In the 9th century they raided France, Ireland, Scotland and as far as the Mediterranean. And especially in France, Vikings of different nationalities began to unite in order to increase their raids. And they also began to move into the interior of France by river, famously laying siege to Paris in 845. But the West Franks began to fortify their towns, leaving the Vikings unable to raid, so many turned their attention to England. Meanwhile, as all this was going on, Wessex under King Edbert had expanded a great deal. The Viking raids began to increase in size from 30 to 35 ships in the 840s to one fleet of over 350 ships that attacked London and Canterbury in 851. Plus in 851 the Vikings for the first time stayed in England over the winter. Then in 865, Ivar the Boneless, Ubba and Halfdan Ragnarsson led an army into England. They were apparently the sons of Ragnar Lodbrok, who, according to legend, was thrown into a pit of snakes by Aella of Northumbria. They led the great heathen army of probably just over 1,000 men, and it wasn't a raiding party like before, but an invasion force. Their armies landed in East Anglia in 865, but King Edmund quickly bought peace by giving them horses, further increasing their mobility and fighting capabilities. The following year they went to Northumbria, which was in a period of turmoil because their king, Osbert, was overthrown by Aella just a couple years before. So dissension was rife and the great heathen army captured York and killed Aella of Northumbria by, according to legend, breaking his ribs and spreading out his lungs. In his place, Egbert I was installed as a puppet king as the Vikings marched on Mercia. The Mercians managed to secure an alliance with Wessex, but the great heathen army captured Nottingham and forced the Mercians to also pay for peace. In 869 they decided to return to East Anglia, but this time they killed Edmund and took over his kingdom. It is also around this time that Ivar the Boneless left, potentially to Viking-controlled Dublin, to rule as king. Halfdan Ragnarsson took over the great heathen army and received reinforcements when Bacseg arrived with his great summer army. Together they invaded Wessex and successfully raided Reading, but King Athelred of Wessex and his brother Alfred successfully repulsed the Viking army at the Battle of Ashdown in 871. The victory was costly but not substantial. However, the Vikings had to return to Northumbria to subdue a rebellion, while in the southeast the Vikings still expanded their holdings. By 874 the heathen army were prepared to advance again. They advanced on Repton, and the Mercian king Bugred decided to flee to Rome instead of facing the Vikings. The Vikings then installed a puppet ruler of Mercia, Ceolwulf II, but they would later take the eastern part of the kingdom for themselves. The great heathen army then split in two. Halfdan continued north, fighting in Strathclyde and later Ireland, while Guthrum, a high-ranking Viking of unknown origin, went south to attack Wessex. But Alfred by this point had become the new king of Wessex. He initially tried to buy their peace, but they continued raiding, so he went to fight them. Despite some early setbacks, his armies formed a shield wall at the Battle of Edington in May 878 and prevailed. He then besieged the retreating Vikings, and verging on starvation, they surrendered. Although Guthrum would become king of East Anglia, he was forced to convert to Christianity as part of the Treaty of Wedmore. Alfred and Guthrum then agreed to divide England in two. Alfred kept control of the southwest, while the Vikings established Danelaw in the north and east, and kept the Anglo-Saxon puppet kingdom of Northumbria under its rule. In the peace, Wessex was completely transformed by Alfred. He created new fortified towns known as burhs, established a standing army, and improved his navy, all of which helped deter future Viking attacks. Yet fighting would break out shortly afterwards again, and the two sides continued struggling for dominance in England until the arrival of the Normans in 1066.